This is our feasibility study of the LA football stadium. In 1995, two professional football teams, the Rams and Raiders, departed from Los Angeles. Since then, LA has yet to have another professional football team held within the largest city in the United States. Right now, LA is host to two NBA teams, one WNBA team, one NHL team, one MLB team, and one MLS team. Now let that sink in for a second. Since 1995, LA has yet to have another professional football team held within the largest city of the United States. So what if LA was to bring football back? Where would they put the stadium at? Well, the City of Industry, which is located within a core 40-mile radius that encircles Los Angeles, Orange County, and the Inland Empire. The City of Industry has a lot of potential, being so close to the largest city in the U.S. and is bordered by 4 major freeways. This city is where LA Football Stadium is to be built. Now, when you want to take a stadium and build it in a certain city, you want to look at the demographics, the population, the races, the ages of these people that are living in this city, or the people that are surrounding the city, like LA, Orange County, and the Inland Empire. Well, let's break down some of that, and we'll start with the age. Encircling LA, Orange County, and the Inland Empire, 38% of the population is made up of ages 18 to 34. 39% is 35 to 54, leaving the last 23% to be 55 and above. Now let's compare this to the NFL. 20% of the NFL's fan base is made up of 18 to 34-year-olds. 34% is 35 to 54-year-olds, leaving the last 37 in the majority of the NFL's fan base to be 55 years of age or older. This just does not add up because the largest part of the NFL's fan base is the 55 and older group, which LA's 55 and older group is the least amount of people that are held within the city. Now let's move on to race. With LA, 46% of the population is white. 45% is Hispanic, leaving the last 15% to be black. The NFL breakdown with race is 8% Hispanic, 15% black, and 77% white. This could also cause a little bit of trouble because of the lack of participation in the NFL fan base from one race. This could also play into a good part for the LA football stadium. Because of the stadium being a multi-purpose stadium, it can hold concerts and live theaters, and also has retail shops and restaurants. But most of all, this stadium is built to be FIFA ready, so it can hold a FIFA World Cup. The stadium is going to be built to be able to reflect the California lifestyle with the outdoor environment, and abundant parking spaces leaves plenty of room for tailgating, which will give the ultimate NFL game day experience for fans across the nation. The stadium would sit on 600 acres, offering 25,000 parking spaces, 75,000 seats, 12,500 club seats, 176 suites, while including restaurants, retail shops, and the live theaters that I talked about previously. This stadium truly is ready to give the ultimate fan experience while reflecting the oh so important California lifestyle.
Majestic Realty is one of the oldest and largest privately held real estate companies in the United States. Ed Roski, the chairman and CEO, holds a firm belief that sports teams are an important part of the fabric of his city, which is why his team is now on course to return to the National Football League. The Los Angeles Stadium at Grand Crossing will be the first stadium built specifically for the NFL in California and will reflect the lifestyle with an outdoor environment and plenty of room to tailgate, which will essentially expand the game day experience for all fans. It will set the standard in environmental sustainability with plans to use far less steel and concrete than other new stadiums and will feature solar technologies and reclaimed water for landscaping. The stadium will utilize the unique topography of the site by building the stadium into the hillside, which will cut down on construction and material costs, especially steel, compared to other stadiums of similar size. It will be the first leadership in energy and environmental design certified stadium in the National Football League. LEED is a green building certification program that recognizes the best in-class building strategies and practices. These certified buildings save money and resources and have a positive impact on the health of occupants while promoting renewable, clean energy.
For the LA Stadium project, my sections were financial options and revenue sources. So, to start off with financial options, I decided to come up with the stadium cost, which I researched. At first we were going to do 3 teams, but the Rams we decided to cut out, so I won't talk about that. They have decided not to propose their stadium project. But to go along with the Raiders and Chargers, who proposed their stadium project, and they proposed theirs for the city of Carson, which is just on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and they did theirs. After they came to the conclusion, their project came out to be a total cost of $1.7 billion estimated, which is a very large amount. But they also have a lot of stuff inside the stadium for fans to do, and they can multi-use stadium for concerts and stuff. And to get to the funding part of it, most stadiums, a lot of stadiums, including Lucas Oil, they are publicly funded, which deals with taxpayers and all that stuff. And for this type of a stadium, it's most likely to be a privately funded stadium, and that would have to go through with bank bonds and all that type of stuff, which after those bank bonds, the stadium, the personnel would pay the bank bonds back through the ticket and broadcasting revenue through the stadium, and also the 2 teams combined. And this type of funding here, the privately, it's a lot easier to do with 2 teams. Just the fact that with 2 teams, the money, the revenue brings in more. And also, to go back to the publicly funding part, for a city like Los Angeles, I would say publicly funding, I mean, it would work out in some way, but then again, with the population, it would cause a lot of controversy. I mean, just to deal with the taxpayers paying for the stadium through taxes and all that stuff, it would just, because a city like Los Angeles, half the people there aren't going to pay attention to football, because most of them might like baseball and not football and all that stuff. But just saying, publicly funding would pretty much bring a lot of controversy. And now to revenue sources. For revenue sources, the most type of revenue would be ticket concession sales. This is pretty much the biggest type of revenue for any sport if you think about it. But football, it is proven that stadium revenue or ticket and concession sales is the biggest type of revenue a stadium can bring in. And if you have a very good team, then you're most likely to really do outstanding when it comes to ticket revenue. Other revenue sources can be non-NFL events at the stadium. For example, you can have concerts, you can have charity events going on like 5Ks, anything like that. And after researching, it has been proven that Oakland pretty much has the best potential out of the two teams, Raiders and Chargers, to bring in the revenue just due to the fans in the city and the corporate sponsors and all that stuff. So Oakland is, their revenue, I guess, is very good, even though they've been on a downfall the last, well, let's say 10 years, really. Fans still go out and watch them. They still buy apparel. I mean, they're just, even though they've been, oh, I'm trying to figure out what the, their fans are not very good fans. Let's just go with that. They've been told that. Let's go to, and for my last example, I'm going to talk about the MetLife Stadium example. And this is, MetLife Stadium has two teams that play in their stadium, the New York Jets and the New York Giants. Now, after looking at these bar graphs I came up with that I looked online, I found the average attendance for the Jets and the Giants dating back from 2008 to recently. And in 2008, surprisingly, the Jets beat the Giants in fan attendance for average, which they averaged 79,500 and the Giants averaged 79,000. But since 2005 to 2014, the Giants have averaged more fans. They've averaged close to 80,000. The Jets have averaged close to 78,000. But the part about this fan attendance stuff is the matter of success. I mean, the last 7-8 years, the Jets have not produced like they should have. Of course, with Coach Rex Ryan, it's not going to really work that well. Saying he wants to go to the Super Bowl every year and he doesn't even make the playoffs. Then you got the Giants, who are known for beating Tom Brady and the Patriots the last 3 times. And the fans love their Giants. The Giants are in the race just about every year. The last couple years, they've been close to making the playoffs and just came short. So for the Giants, fans are going to go out and watch them. And this is the biggest part of stadium revenue is fan attendance. I mean, some teams, yeah, they're down. Fans don't want to go out and watch them. But other teams can be down and fans will still go out and watch them. I mean, I know this doesn't have to do with football, but for example, the Royals, they've been a down team for the last 20 years, except for these last 2 or 3 years. But fans, they still drew 20,000, 25,000 fans. And the Indians, when they have horrible years, they can't even draw 15,000 fans. So, I mean, it's just fan attendance matters, and it's what really brings in the revenue for any type of professional football team or college team. So,
Because of any feasibility study's immense size, it has been decided that it is most important to only focus on the larger revenue sources and expenses. The estimated gross of incomes and expenses were created by investigating other organizations of similar size along with different sports in general. The findings were then compiled and manipulated based upon the size of Los Angeles, population density, and the overwhelming response of Los Angeles citizens to reinstate an NFL team within the city of industry. In concordance with this, the numbers generated only reflect a single-use stadium housing a single professional football team. This does not consider possible additional revenues and expenses generated from other events that may be housed in the proposed stadium. This was due to adequately determine if a single NFL team would be able to build a new stadium in LA and produce a profit without the help of unpredictable revenue streams that are oftentimes unreliable. The large revenue sources selected are ticket sales, concessions, advertising, merchandising, and parking lot fees. Ticket sales are projected to bring $185 million in revenue. Ticket sales are broken down between general admission tickets and premium tickets. General admission tickets usually cost between $65 and $75, while premium tickets cost between $140 and $170. At an estimated increase in general admission tickets of only 5% and premium tickets only 3%, This raises the projected revenue from $185 million to somewhere between $190.55 million and $194.2 million, depending on the number of tickets sold. These expectations are borrowed from similar organizations while also taking into consideration variable ticket pricing, or VTPs. VTPs are used to change the ticket prices depending on the demand for tickets. For high-profile games such as playoff games and rivalry games, the prices of tickets will grow, while the opposite is true for tickets to less sought-after games. Concessions are expected to produce $23.6 million in revenue, estimating a 2.5% growth rate, which is modest, raises the projected revenue to $24.19 million. Advertising is the largest projected revenue at an estimated $272 million and a low increase of only 1%. It jumps by $2.72 million to $274.72 million. Merchandising is expected to bring $11.1 million with a 3% increase. It raises the projection to $11.43 million. Finally, parking fees are projected at $20.8 million. After a 2% increase, it grows to $21.22 million. These projections are merely speculative, even with legitimate evidence to support the projections. Because of the elasticity of the economy, coupled with the possibility of housing an unsuccessful football team, it is also possible that these projections may be much larger than what has been calculated, or possibly negative. On the other side of the coin lies the growth expectations for both the football team and the stadium itself. Player salaries are constantly increasing as the NFL's collective bargaining agreement is always being revised. Player salaries are expected to cost $115 million initially, with an expected increase of 2% bringing the cost to $117.3 million. Both team and stadium operations are combined to cost a total of $130 million. Although it is expected to remain consistent year to year, a 2% growth rate has been included to account for unexpected expenses and inflation. This raises the projected cost to $132.6 million. The stadium cost is expected to be $1.7 billion, being completely privately funded. However, this leaves property tax that must be accounted for at an initial cost of $30.9 million and continuing annually. Social insurance that covers the stadium customers costs $118.4 million. It is expected that this insurance cost is locked in and will not change year to year. Finally, personal income tax must be included because of its implications in regards to economic and fiscal impacts. It is expected to cost the employees just more than $111.6 million annually. Economic impact can be defined as the measurable change in economic activity within a specific area. Also, it includes the indirect and induced activities that follow suit because of the interconnectedness of economics. Direct output earnings and new employment opportunities are the three categories measured to determine direct impact. In a study completed by the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, it was found that 16,740 jobs would be introduced to the community. These new jobs would receive a combined $1.1 billion in earnings. Lastly, the total output would be more than $2.6 billion in business revenue. Indirect impacts are calculated by determining additional output, earnings, and employment that is created due to the newfound need in the area that is influenced. An additional output of $506.7 million is expected in revenue. Also, another 7,560 jobs would be added and $3.43 million in employee earnings would be introduced to the workforce. The indirect impacts are simply more difficult to measure with accuracy. This is because the indirect impacts are most easily referred to as ripple effects. A bump in local business is expected along with higher tourism rates and tourism costs. The most important part of economic impacts to note is the fact that these impacts are cyclical, meaning that by introducing more income into the local economy, more money will be spent locally, thus bolstering the economy even further. These figures are again estimations based upon data collected from similar events and building projects. Until a stadium is built in LA, it is impossible to accurately and fully explore all economic impacts that will take place. Fiscal impacts are generally things attributed to building and usage of a single or multi-use stadium. The stadium's fiscal impact and the NFL team's fiscal impact have been separated to accurately show the difference in revenue generation between an organization and property being developed in order to build a stadium. The stadium would generate $220.3 million in federal tax revenue, $70.9 million in state tax revenue, $32.2 million in county tax revenue, and $14.8 million in city tax revenue, while the NFL team's fiscal impacts would create $19.5 million in state tax revenue, $9.3 million in county tax revenue, and $4.4 million in city tax revenue. These estimations only account for a single NFL team being introduced to Los Angeles. A second NFL team would likely more than double these expectations.
Displayed on this slide is the projected income statement based on the Majestic Realty Company's financial plan for the Los Angeles Football Stadium. Make note that the naming rights revenue is displayed at the high end of the dollar range Majestic believes they can receive from a contract. This would be a continuous annual revenue. Total expenses are broken down into a 90-10 split, with 90% of expenses being incurred in building the stadium and the remaining 10% from the headquarters. The income statement shows a net loss of $320 million. However, the loss would actually be higher at $350 million because the naming rights revenue shown would go towards paying off the debt services for the loan that Majestic hopes to receive. This loan would make up for the $350 million loss from construction costs. This income statement is a rough depiction of the financial plan for payment of construction, not the operating revenues and expenses that the stadium may receive. A comparison of Los Angeles Football Stadium to be built in the City of Industry to a proposed Farmers Field to be built in downtown LA will help display whether a stadium in industry is feasible or not financially. First, let's look at total projected costs. Majestic Company has estimated that the total cost of the team headquarters and stadium will be $800 million as shown on the financial plan in the previous slide. This estimate was produced in 2008, and Majestic still believes that cost would hold true today. If compared to Farmers Field, there is a $400 million difference in costs, with Farmers Field's projected costs coming in at $1.2 billion. It raises some red flags about the cost of Los Angeles Football Stadium. Either the stadium is going to end up being a low-end facility not fitting of the NFL high-class style, or the differences in cost make you assume Majestic hasn't adjusted for inflation, because the time value of money would cause the cost to be well over $1 billion, since no stadium since 2008 has been built for less than $1 billion. Next, Majestic is going to use revenue from the NFL and personal seat licenses to offset some of the construction costs. The income statement projected $300 million in revenue from the seat licenses. Compared to Farmers Field, there is another huge difference in the projected revenues. Farmers Field projects half of what Majestic projects at $150 million after taxes. Another red flag is raised about Majestic Company's projected dollar amounts. Either Majestic has forgotten to take out taxes from their revenue, or they believe they will sell enough licenses to break $300 million after taxes. The problem with the latter is that Los Angeles Football Stadium is located in an industrial park in a city with a population of less than 2,000 people and with a long drive from LA because of traffic. Meaning I don't see industry getting the market demand for those seat licenses because of location. Downtown LA is going to have a greater demand for personal seat licenses because of the better location to LA's population and attractions instead of an industrial park. The difference between the cost of construction and the revenues from personal seat licenses and the NFL donation to the project, Majestic will have to find a way to make up the net loss of $350 million. They have decided to fund that difference with a bank loan. If they receive a 30-year loan with 7% interest, they will have to pay a debt service of around $28 million annually. Majestic plans to use the revenue from their naming rights contract to pay the debt service. Red flags get raised again. Majestic believes they can receive anywhere from $25 to $30 million annually for naming rights. However, no naming rights contract in the history of sports has produced annual revenues that high. Farmers Field had a signed contract for only $23 million, which was the highest in history. In an industrial city, I don't see how Majestic will receive a contract worth that much. Therefore, they will still have a couple $1,000,000 in debt services to make up from operating profit. Also, Majestic may struggle to receive a loan unless they can find a company or a team owner to give them an equity finance backing. No team owner will want to put equity into a stadium until they know for sure that the financing is secure to build the stadium. This creates a lot of uncertainty in whether or not Majestic Company will ever get enough financing to complete the stadium project. From all the red flags and uncertainty, Majestic Company is on the verge of operating at a loss from the day the stadium opens, which means operating revenues will have to greatly exceed expenses to not only make up for the loss on the construction, but to also break a profit. Like I said before, being in an industrial area will hinder Los Angeles Football Stadium in creating a large market demand for ticket sales, which in turn hinders other revenue possibilities. If the stadium can't break a profit, they will continue to operate at a loss year in and year out, which will eventually cause the team to move elsewhere and the stadium to fold. Majestic's financial plan is producing too many red flags in how the stadium will be financed, if it can even get financed, and with how off their dollar projections are compared to other stadiums like Farmers Field, which is proposed to be built down the road in LA. Their numbers just aren't adding up, which is creating a lot of uncertainty and risk for the City of Industry, Majestic Company, and for a team to move into the stadium. In the long run, the risk doesn't seem to have the ability to create a large enough return on the investment, which makes the project unfeasible for any party involved. Besides, there are too many other possibilities for stadium project options in or near Los Angeles that seem to have much less uncertainty and a greater possibility for a meaningful return on investment. For the City of Industry, it is not financially feasible for the Los Angeles Football Stadium to be built. Their breakdown of expenses does not correlate with today's time value of money. Majestic claims that the cost of headquarters and the stadium will be roughly $800 million. However, the time value of money, as well as the comparison of other NFL stadiums, is projecting the project to be over $1 billion. The income of revenue sources is estimated to be higher than historical data has proclaimed. Majestic claims that when naming rights are set in stone, it will be between $25 million and $30 million per year. Compared to Farmers Field, if they would have followed through with their naming rights contract, they would have received $23 million annually, which is traditionally high for any professional sporting venue. In conclusion, this proves that Majestic's plan is flawed and will only continually produce debt, which will essentially cause the stadium to fold.